I'm Mary Parker, and welcome to this episode of Eureka's Sounds of Science. Nothing can make up for the devastating losses caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. Every aspect of our lives seems to have been impacted. However, there is a small silver lining: the incredible advances in medical treatment and technology that has come from the cooperation of researchers and the resources they were granted to fight the virus. Joining me today is Lawrence Ganti, the president of SiO2 Materials Science, a company based out of Alabama. One of the company's products is vaccine vials, which obviously grew in demand during the pandemic. He's here to discuss how COVID impacted his company and the greater trend of COVID's overall effect on emerging medical technologies. Welcome, Lawrence.
Welcome. I'm happy to be here. Thank you very much.
We're very happy to have you. So, can we start with a little bit about your company's history? When were you founded?
Sure. So, SiO2 Materials Science, we were founded in late 2012, and we were kind of a spin out of another company called CSP Technologies, which was making plastic tubing for the medical device industry.
Mm-hmm.
And we spent really the last, I would say, 8-9 years doing research and development of coming up with this new material, which is what ended up forming these new COVID vaccine vials.
Mm-hmm. And can you describe the vaccine vials? What are their strengths?
So the vials themselves, normally vaccine vials or medication vials are typically using traditional glass. So they're a small glass vial. What
Mm-hmm.
we've done is we've invented, a new material, which is a hybrid of glass and plastic. So typical problems with glass is if you drop it, it breaks, right? Everybody
Mm-hmm.
knows that glass has those kind of problems. There are other problems in terms of delamination, where you have metal particles and glass particles that come off the vials into the medication. Those are kind of well known in the industry, but there hasn't really been an alternative. So over
Mm-hmm.
the last 10 years, what we've done as a company was try to eliminate all these kind of problems and invent effectively a new material, which is a hybrid. It fuses glass and plastic. So the outer shell, the vial itself is plastic. It's a polymer. It's unbreakable. You can run it over with a Hummer. You can drop it out of a building. It doesn't break. But the inside of the vial has a microscopic lining of glass, and it's pure SiO2, hence the name of the company, where it's 10 times or 30 times thinner than a human hair. So you don't actually see the glass lining, but it has all the protective barrier properties of glass.
Hmm.
Glass, as we may or may not know, is often used in packaging when you need to keep out moisture and keep out oxygen. And most of these biological drugs and vaccines need to have stability against moisture and against oxygen coming into the container.
Mm-hmm.
That's why you don't see typical plastic vials being used for medication.
Right. That makes sense. How does the process work? Like, how do you get this thin layer of glass on top of plastic?
So it's a process that's called plasma enhanced chemical vapor deposition.
Mm-hmm.
It's a technology that was invented many years ago and used for in the microelectronic space. So you're typically seeing this kind of plasma deposition used in microchips, places like Intel, Cisco,
Mm-hmm.
places like that. But they've never been successfully applied in a medical setting. And the main challenge with medicine is that you can't you can't have a 99.9% barrier, right? You have to
Right.
have a 100% barrier. Whereas microelectronics, things that are not being injected into your body, it's close enough, right? But for us, being able to come up with this technology was really what we spent the last 10 years was how do you create this microscopic layer of pure glass without affecting the integrity of the plastic vial, but at the same time ensuring and guaranteeing that you have 100% coverage. And that's
Mm-hmm.
what we've been doing over the past years.
Yeah, Charles River has a department that does endotoxin testing and all those sort of things. And this is obviously the sort of thing that would totally need an endotoxin test because it goes into the bloodstream. So, like, the glass is thick enough to, like, prevent any microbes from entering into the specimen itself.
Absolutely. So we've worked with River Labs. We've worked with a number of other testing labs. So the typical things that they test for is they test for whether microscopic entities can go in and out of the container.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
also, what they also test for is that plastic and glass have things called extractables and leachables.
Hmm.
These are things that come off the actual container itself. It's inherent to the material. And what they're testing for is how much of that is coming into the substance or coming into the liquid of the vial. And we're crystal clean. I mean, we're better than plastic, and we don't have any of the problems of glass. So that's why we like to say that we have the best of both worlds. We
Cool.
have all the protective qualities that are needed from glass in terms of oxygen and moisture barrier, but we don't have the typical endotoxin profile of plastic. We're a much cleaner substance. So we're equivalent to glass and we're equivalent to plastic, and we've eliminated all the drawbacks of both.
Yeah. This is completely on a separate topic, but now I'm imagining sort of a car windshield with this very thin layer of glass over plastic, making it, maybe not so prone to cracking if it gets hit by a pebble on the highway. But that'd be pretty cool. But
Well, there are actually, so we actually are working with various government entities on various applications. So on the one hand, you're taking this application and we've used it for biological syringes. We've used it for vaccine vials. There's even a leading baby bottle manufacturer that got one of the top 10 products of the year by Time Magazine. They're using our technology, so it's basically a plastic bottle, but the inside, the baby's milk is only touching glass.
hmm,
So the applications are endless. I mean, you could use it on bulletproofing of certain cars. You can use it on mascara tubes. You can use it on baby bottles. So there's endless possibilities to the technology.
very cool. And just out of pure curiosity, can any of these be made from recycled materials? I assume they can't be recycled afterwards because of the bonding.
That's correct. So well, the thing is, they can be recycled depending on the use.
Mm,
So
okay.
a baby bottle can be recycled because arguably you're only using milk. If you're using a drug containers are not able to be recycled. They're treated as medical waste.
Hmm.
So it doesn't matter if it's plastic or glass. Once there's medicine put inside of the container, they're treated as medical waste. Now,
Right.
having said that, if you're thinking from an ESG perspective, we use 10 times less heat energy than glass. We use almost no water. Where our footprint is much smaller than a glass manufacturing site. So we're much more environmentally friendly than say traditional glass manufacturing of vials.
Well, that's good. So, I mean, obviously, since your company broke off in 2012, you've had these vials since before COVID. But how did COVID affect demand for them?
For us, the demand went up quite dramatically in the sense that we were starting off initially as a syringe manufacturer. Most of our customers were looking for syringes
Hmm.
using the same technology. Now, what happened during COVID was there was a massive uptake in terms of the need for vials, and that came across. You had anywhere between 10 and 15 potential drug manufacturers who were working on vaccines. All of them needed vials.
Hmm.
So what happened was is there was a glass shortage. And in our discussions with the US government, as they started to look at rebuilding the infrastructure as part of Operation Warp Speed, they in our discussions with us, we were able to explain to them how we can ramp up our manufacturing quite fast. Typical glass manufacturing, if you're going to build a new manufacturing site, it takes anywhere between 24 and 36 months
Hmm.
to build a new factory. With for us, building a new factory was taking 6 to 9 months, so substantially shorter. And that's just because the technology is different. It's a
Hmm.
much faster scaling technology. We also use a very different supply chain. We're not using glass or glass sand at all in our process. So we're basically using plastic resin and
Hmm.
then various gases to produce the glass-like barrier. So for us, our capacity, our ability to produce the vials went from producing 10 million vials per year
Hmm.
to all of a sudden producing 10 million vials per month.
Mm.
And that was a huge benefit to the U.S. government and to some of our customers to be able to supply them vials very quickly for COVID-19.
So, how fast were you able to ramp up production to that level?
That was crazy. If I remember that time, I mean, I think we went from, I mean, literally we built 4 factories in less than 9 months,
Hmm.
and these are kind of greenfielded factories. So we ramped up very quickly. We went from 10 million vials producing on an annual basis to producing that much on a monthly basis, and demand, and we were not meeting the demand that we were required to. So that
Hmm.
was, we continued to scale since that time.
Yeah, and it seems like demand for the vaccines and for boosters and for, subsequent variations is probably going to be continuing, although, hopefully if we're lucky as a species, not to quite the same extent that we've had to get to where we are now.
No, correct. I mean, and the thing is, what happened with this is that there was so much uncertainty,
Mhm.
right? Even to the point where people were saying we didn't know how many doses they were going to fit in a vial. So, initially we were thinking, okay, we're producing 10 million vials per month. That's 120 million vials per year. But people forget that that's translates into 1.2 billion doses, right? Because you're talking
Right.
about, 10, and now it's actually 15, 10 to 15 doses per vial. These are multi-dose vials. So, and along with that, being able to, put together shipping studies, it's not just producing the vial, you're producing a substantial amount of data, substantial amount of documentation,
Mhm.
evidence to submit. Our customers, when they submit their regulatory approval, they're submitting the approval of their drug or vaccine inside of our vial or inside of our
Right,
container.
yeah. Yeah, and I think that's kind of a something for people to keep in mind when people talk about thinking that the vaccines were produced so quickly. It's not so much that the science wasn't there. It's like that's really what got them through. The science was there. Like we'd already studied, mRNA vaccines. We'd already studied other coronaviruses. And companies like yours had these systems in place to scale up production quickly that, kind of really saved the day in terms of putting this stuff out there as quickly as possible.
Well, yeah, and to your point, right? We were working with these mRNA vaccine companies way before COVID, so they had
Mhm.
done what we call stability testing of the type of drug or type of vaccine inside of our containers, for months, many months beforehand, almost, in some cases, sometimes multiple years of data. So it's not like all of a sudden here comes this new vaccine vial and a new
Mhm.
vaccine and you put it together, right? The work has been done, as you said, for many months before COVID even hit.
Yeah, exactly. I really try to emphasize that with people when they ask me, if working in the drug industry, how did we get these vaccines so quickly? It's like, well, the bedrock was there,
Mm-hmm.
and we had an incredible motivating factor, and also funds from the government to offset risk for companies putting a lot of energy into something that they weren't sure if it was going to work or not. So,
Correct.
yeah. So how much lead time did you get?
Um, like 3 months.
Yeah.
So,
Sounds about right. Yep.
3 months from, to go from 0 to 100, and, as soon as possible. So there was, I mean, it was kind of like just go run as fast as you can and put everything
Yeah.
together. And we ended up doing. People think, and it's very interesting. People think that people did shortcuts. It's actually the other way around, because you can't
Mhm.
really do shortcuts in pharma. You need
Mhm.
the data and documentation. What we ended up doing, we actually ended up spending a lot more money on overdoing things,
Right.
right? Or having studies done multiple times, because you couldn't afford to say, okay, if this sample wasn't working, submit another one and wait another 3 months, right?
Yeah.
It was, okay, you have samples, send them all, get them all tested, and then come back. And then we say, okay, well, then you ended up scrapping or throwing out a bunch of stuff, which, okay, at the time, it was speed was more important than cost.
Yeah. Yeah. And things were being done concurrently. It's like they might be
Right.
manufacturing the vaccine itself and you're manufacturing the vials and you guys are hoping that your timelines will meet up, but you don't know
Hmm.
for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So speaking of which, bringing in the bigger picture, what are your views on how COVID has shaped innovation generally?
I thought that there was a lot more emphasis on collaboration.
Mhm.
If you had asked me 6 months ago, I would have said, yeah, definitely this has driven collaboration. I actually don't know if it has, right? Because I kind of see pharma almost reverting back to being isolated, in
Mhm.
individuals again. What I do think has happened is that, you mentioned mRNA vaccines being around for some time, or the technology being around for some time. The general nature of pharma is, you're not, it doesn't pay, I hate to say this, but it doesn't pay to focus on, certain tropical diseases or certain
Hmm.
vaccines, which, might only affect a small population,
Right.
right? So what happened was nobody was focusing on some of these COVID type of vaccines because, all right, it's a vaccine. Where everybody was focusing on was cancer,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Everybody focuses on cancer. All the cell and gene therapy is focusing on rare diseases. There's more money there. Um, but then the patient population is smaller. The money required to do large scale studies is not as much if you were doing it for a more general population. So what happened was is that mRNAs were maybe not so successful in some of these cancers or rare diseases, and there was a lot of work and trials being done. But then when it came to something more mainstream, something that didn't require what I would call durability of the drug,
Hmm.
right? That it just attacks and then goes away versus having to stay in your system for, like cancer. It's a longer term therapy that has to be there for extended periods of time to kill the cancer. Um, I think what happened was is that people started to realize that okay, with a substantial amount of money, there is a lot of things that can be battled in pharma, right?
Hmm.
But private industry is not always going to be focused on the same thing as, say, government. And if you bring the two together, really the opportunities are endless. I mean, the way we brought, multiple vaccines for COVID-19 to market was really because there was a huge emphasis and there was a financial element, right? I mean,
Hmm.
company look at, BioNTech, Moderna, these companies were startups and they did
Right.
not have, they had substantial investments, but they didn't have an endless pocketbook to be
Hmm.
able to produce things. Now these are multi-billion-dollar companies based on a single drug or vaccine,
Hmm.
right? So it changes the way we have to think about drug development and how companies are formed and how they're motivated to bring things to market,
Right.
right? So imagine taking that same kind of money, putting that towards HIV. It's not unrealistic to think that we could wipe out the HIV virus with the right amount of substantial funding and focus and energy around that.
Hmm. Oh, that wouldn't that be something? But luckily, I mean, none of these things exist in a bubble. Any advances that get made in one area could potentially be applied to advances in another area.
Yes,
Fingers crossed.
fingers crossed. Yeah.
So, beyond your own products, what, if any, changes do you see to pharma packaging post COVID?
Well, pharma is still an industry that is adverse to change, right? And it's embedded in the way the industry operates, right? There's so much risk taken into developing a new drug that the rest of the pharmaceutical supply chain is all about eliminating risk.
Hmm.
So if you come out with this brand new, and take us for example, you come out with this brand new, arguably 100 times better package, but it's still new.
Right.
So the pharma companies are very risk averse. Now we benefited because pharma companies were almost forced to try our technology because they couldn't get access to the old stuff,
Hmm.
right? So that's helped substantially. But going forward, what I would like to see is I'd like to see more elements of the pharmaceutical supply chain, looking at newer and cutting edge technologies of how they can solve problems, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know if I see that moving very quickly. There's a lot of incumbents along the supply chain that are highly resistant to any kind of change.
Right. I think we will have to eventually, though, if we want to survive as a species, because we're going to have to start majorly factoring in things like climate impact.
Right.
And, factoring that into a supply chain from any industry is, I think, going to be a much bigger deal going forward, or at least it should be.
Sure.
But,
No, I
yeah.
agree with you 100%. Everything relates to incentive, right?
Hmm.
And I'm a big believer in that. People do, and organizations do, and entities do what they're incentivized to do.
Hmm.
So until the incentives are aligned, we can talk about environmental and ESG and sustainability all we want, but you're going to get some people who are moving in that direction, but you're not going to get large amounts of industry moving there unless there are substantial incentives to do so.
Right.
And those
Yeah.
don't have to be monetary incentives, right? They could be workforce incentives, right? You're not going to be able to hire the top talent anymore, because the top talent of the next generation are all worried about sustainability. So if
Yeah.
you don't, if you're not moving in that direction, then you're not going to hire the right people. I mean, that's also an incentive. It doesn't. When I talk incentives, I'm not talking about just dollars and cents.
Yeah, that's a good point. I hadn't thought about that, but I think that's definitely the case. All right. Well, thank you so much, Lawrence, for providing your insights. And good luck with the scaling going forward.
My
I think
pleasure.
it'll
And
be, I think it'll be a long-term thing for sure.
absolutely. And we're just trying to help out. We're trying to save the world one vial at a time. And we have a
Yeah.
fantastic team, a great group of people who are working day and night with their families to really try to make things work. So thank you for the time. It was a great conversation.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Cheers. Take care.